Flesh and Blood is the most competitive TCG out there. At least some of the most competitive TCG players out there label the game like this. And I have to say, I think Flesh and Blood has some of the most compelling surroundings for a competitive TCG player. Also because recently they announced that they will be continuing their huge prize support of $1.5 million US for the next year, and also topping that with their newly world tour for 2025. And I think I have a very interesting point here that is just the right timing to talk about with you, and that is their tournament structure actually, because I am coming from Yu-Gi-Oh! And I also follow a little bit the rolling out competitive scene in Disney Lorcana. And while comparing these TCGs, I think there is something very interesting to talk about. And that is starting with us looking at the rollout for the next year in the World Tour for Flesh and Blood. And I think as the most competitive TCG out there, of course, the pinnacle of all will be the World Championship, which will be in the USA for 2025 in Flesh and Blood. And also we have 2 Pro Tours, and then a lot of big events like the Battle Hardened Callings, and then also the National Season. So why am I really wanting to make a critical look on this here? Because I think this is really the most amazing lookout that we as Flesh and Blood players can have, right? But like I said, the recently rolling out of Disney Lorcana with their challenge, and specifically the European Championship, got me thinking. And that is a point that I always had in Flesh and Blood. I've been following the competitive scene in Flesh and Blood for over 3 years now. And I also had a lot of experience talking to these most competitive TCG players in Flesh and Blood. And I was always wondering why we don't have a European Championship in Flesh and Blood. And that is also a question I want to ask here again. But I also want to look at it from a neutral point here, comparing, the tournament structures in these different TCGs a little bit. And also I want to hear your opinions down in the comments about it. I really want to read all of your comments about it, really, because I think this is a very interesting point here. Because not every TCG has a European Championship, right? And I think Lorcana goes a really interesting road here. And I also think that through participating in this European Championship, we are not only seeing who is the best European Disney Lorcana player, but we are also seeing who will be earning an invitation to the Disney Lorcana World Championship in 2025, which will be the first World Championship in Disney Lorcana. And so Flesh and Blood labeling itself, or being labeled as the most competitive TCG out there, is really being put to the test in the next year, I think, when Disney Lorcana also is doing their World Championship for the first time. And I really love to see that they are doing this European Championship, because I also remember coming from Yu-Gi-Oh! That we also had this European World Championship qualifier. And I always thought that is so amazing, seeing all of the best players from Europe coming together and seeing who is the best of the best from Europe. Of course, I am from Germany, and if you're new to this channel, my name is Alex. I'm happy that you're viewing this video here. And let me know also, are you a Flesh and Blood player, or are you coming from another TCG and are just interested in getting this comparison out? So let's come to Disney Lorcana again, because I think really, oh man, I hate all of these ads here. What in the world? So Disney Lorcana, talking about the World Championship here, their World Championship is an invite-only event. And I think when we compare the World Championship structure here a little bit more, Yu-Gi-Oh! Of course is also a invite-only World Championship. And sorry guys, having a little sniff here. Flesh and Blood also has this invite-only World Championship, but it is a little bit different than it is in Yu-Gi-Oh! And I don't know yet really how it is in Disney Lorcana, but I think from the information that I had seen online that you really can only participate in the Disney Lorcana World Championships if you earn that invitation yourself. And I think that is the big difference that we have here in these, TCGs actually, because for Lorcana, like I said, 99% sure, and for Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm 100% sure you can only get into the World Championship if you really earn it yourself. And the big difference here coming to Flesh and Blood is that also they are labeling their World Championship as an qualified players only tournament, but in reality really anyone can participate in the most competitive TCG event in Flesh and Blood by just getting a PTI, a professional tournament invitation that they can just buy from one of those players out there that earned a PTI, and they basically buy that PTI and then they redeem it so they can themselves then participate in the World Championship. On the baseline, I don't think this is something bad to have. I actually think that is something very interesting for those competitive players in Flesh and Blood, because the PTIs that they earn, they can basically sell in the secondary market to other players who also want to play in the World Championship, maybe players that are pretty new to the game, maybe very competitive players that are coming from other games and just want to jump right into the World Championships. And we've seen players in the past, making an advance out of this because they were pretty new to Flesh and Blood, but through buying a PTI, they could participate in these tournaments. Also, you could just give the PTI to one of your friends if you like that. I heard stories of that already. And I also think seeing the results from the World Championships throughout the last 3 years, that most of the top performing players are not really players that are not known in the Flesh and Blood, competitive circle. Let's say it like this. Of course, maybe there are names under the top performing players that are not that well known, but most of the players that are placing well in the World Championships in Flesh and Blood are most of the time players that are putting the hard work into getting good at this game, because that is really what is needed to participate at this high stakes event in Flesh and Blood. You really need to be good at this game to make good results, just like I also think it is in Lorcana or in Yu-Gi-Oh! But the difference, like I said, is pretty obvious here, that you can just basically buy yourself into the World Championship. And also, coming back to that comparison for the European Championship, I'm really wondering, why we don't have a European Championship. I get it though, that we have those big pro tours in Flesh and Blood, and that are basically like on the European Championship level in Disney Lorcana or in Yu-Gi-Oh! But it's a little bit different, right? Let me tell you though, I think it is very interesting to come to this point here, because in the past we had something nearly close, as it can get to a European Championship in Flesh and Blood. And I'm wondering if we're getting that in the future again, because honestly, like I said, I think it's an integral part for the community to see which player is the best of a region, and that is why I love the national season. But in Europe, honestly, we have that many national championships because we have so many different countries and also pretty small countries, and every country is getting their own national championship, of course. Then in comparison, USA is a very big country and they only have one national championship. So basically, if you're playing in the USA and you're participating in the national championship for the USA, you basically know after the event who is the best USA player. And that is something that we don't have in Europe, and which I think is a bummer. I would really love to see that. And like I said, we had something very similar in the past. In 2022, actually, at the Calling in Utrecht, we had something very interesting. And players who played back then know that, I think. It was called the European Champions Battle. And that was basically a true invite-only tournament where you could really only participate if you qualified for it during the season before Calling Utrecht. I don't really know the exact participation rules in this event, because I couldn't find it online here. But I think it was either placing in a top 8 at nationals or at a top 8 at a calling in Europe. So also players coming over from US or APAC region to Europe and placing in the top 8 of a calling could then also participate in this European Champions Battle. Keep that in mind. But it was a true invite-only event in Flesh and Blood. And I thought also it was not really that well known, even though when you are an avid member of the Flesh and Blood community, maybe you don't know that yet. And that is why I wanted to get it out, because there is even an article still on the website, of course. These articles are sticking around, but we had a European champion from the Champions Battle. It's not a European Championship, but it's kind of close to it as it gets, right? And also looking at this top 8, we had, so to say, the best 8 players from Europe. Like I said, there were also players like Yuanji participating in this event. I made a deck profile even with him here on the channel. Him showing his Oldhim deck profile that he played in this European Champions Battle. But I would love to see something like this again, in addition to those already very amazing tournament structure that we have in Flesh and Blood. Like I said, don't get me wrong, I really love to see this rollout for the next year, but I'm just wondering, how we are getting this European Champions thing back, or if we even don't get it back at all. But I think a lot of the competitive players who were participating in this event, and it was 74 players actually participating in this event, I think they loved it all and they would love to see it again. And I also really want to hear your opinion on this, qualified players only thing. Like I said, I don't want to play down the World Championships in Flesh and Blood, but talking to a lot of the competitive players and also seeing the comparison between Disney Lorcana and Yu-Gi-Oh! Here, I'm really interested to see how this will evolve in Flesh and Blood and if this structure will change in the future. If at some point we maybe see the World Championships in Flesh and Blood being a little bit more exclusive. Don't get me wrong, like buying a PTI is not something that everyone can do, right? A PTI is, I think, everywhere from 500 to $1,000 depending on basically the deal that you are getting. So it's not easy to buy a PTI, but it's also a little bit it's just a little bit different when you can just buy yourself into the World Championships, right, of a game, and then that game is labeled the most competitive TCG out there. I think, like I said, I love Flesh and Blood, and I think it is the most competitive game out there, but I think it is really being put to the test in the next year. And there are, of course, players who may be thinking Lorcana, Yu-Gi-Oh! Or whatever other TCG is the most competitive TCG out there. Guys, if you like this video, leave a like on the video as well. And now I'm really interested to hear your opinion in the comments. I also really want to appreciate your watching this video till the end here, tuning in, and also maybe we see us in the next video.